Welcome to the Under the Hat podcast,
the show where we talk about everything and anything that is top of mind in education.
The goal is to provide meaningful conversations to what is currently happening in our classrooms.
Stories, pains,
moments of success.
We want to hear it all.
Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of Under the Hat. We are sitting in episode 63. 63. Yeah. So Sophie, we are just moving right along.
Wow.
Yeah. So 63. A lot of exciting stuff planned in the spring, I feel, in terms of guests and mixing up formats, that sort of thing. By the way, anybody that is on the regular watching, listening to the show would be keen to hear like feedback on like not just topics, content, but also formatting stuff. So Sophie and I have kind of toyed with this idea. Not to put you on the spot, Sophie, but like we've had this conversation of like almost
not going live,
us not going live, but also like mixing up guest format to like maybe breaking down different things we come across, like blogs, like books, and then bring on authors, kind of do like a pre-post read and then bring the authors on afterwards. So a lot of any other ideas that are out there in the world, we'd be keen to kind of try to adapt and pivot,
or even more panel conversations and things, not just like people who are interested in coming on the show, but like we read this really neat article that really just lit up some light bulbs, like what, and then we want to share that information out with people, type of thing. So any ideas that you guys would be interested in, and we're flexible.
We are. Yeah. So Sophie, super excited about today. I am always up for a good read, being able to think differently about how we support other humans, right? And so super excited about what we're going to dive into today.
Yes, our guests today are a dynamic partnership sitting at the intersection of education, business, and technology. Together, they are co-authors of the bestseller Lead It Like Lasso and the newly released The Business of You, as well as the co-founders of the career readiness platform Blue. One half of this dynamic duo, we have a seasoned tech veteran with over 3 decades of experience who brings the grit of Roy Kent and the humility of Coach Beard. Thank goodness for Gemini. The better half, we have a former math teacher turned ed tech executive who brings pure Ted Lasso energy into the boardroom. They are on a joint mission to help students go from confused to clear by teaching them how to run their lives like a business. Please welcome Nick and Dr. Marnie. Are we both doing things at the same time?
We were both doing things at the same time, but it's okay. I'm going to go ahead and do it. Okay,
you
that was not awkward. All right, awesome.
Hello.
Welcome, friends.
Thanks for having us.
To be here.
Welcome. I'm so excited to have you guys here. I can't wait to talk about your new book and your adventures. But first, let's start with Marnie. Tell us a little bit about your journey to get to where you are now.
Yeah, sure. So I started out as a high school math teacher and went through the ed world, administrator, assistant principal, math supervisor, and accountability coordinator in a school district on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. In the process of doing that, we were using an assessment and a data analytics platform called Performance Matters. I was a raving fan. I had a lot of ideas about what the platform should do and how districts should use it. And I was mouthy enough that the company said, hey, you should run customer success for us. And so I jumped into customer success. And when I landed on my first call with the support team, I found the vice president of technology and support, and his name was Nick Coniglio. So that is how I landed meeting Nick. I'll let him take the story from there because it'll merge, the merge then happens together.
Yeah. Thanks, Marnie. So yeah, I'm the complete opposite, I think, of Marnie. I am a computer programmer as through education, but I had the knack of starting in bootstrap startups for like, I was always employee number single digit, and I just saw a ton of growth, and the growth was always driven by people that you wouldn't normally necessarily target as like the amplifiers, the people that would look great on a resume. So my background has always been about growing people. As Marnie said, that third stop that I landed at was Performance Matters, an ed tech assessment and analytics platform. And that's where we met. And together, jointly, we were responsible for the customer experience. Marnie, customer success, myself, customer support. And what really happened there was that we got acquired and acquired and acquired. We know the ed tech space. And ultimately, we got to the point where the last company that acquired us claimed that they wanted to have raving fans, the teachers, the educators, the board office, and they took all of our resources away. So we had a decision to make. We decided to leave and start our own company. And then we ended up writing books, and we've had a wild ride since then. So it's really been fun. But part of the leaving that company is we had a non-compete. We had to get out of the ed tech space, but that non-compete is now over, and we are back, and we are excited and thrilled. So we're happy to be here.
That's fantastic. And I love how you guys just like happened to meet. It wasn't like you knew each other forever and ever. And it just sort of clicked. And yeah, I love that.
Yeah. I was speaking with someone, a pretty good friend of mine yesterday, kind of about this thing about like life is, we don't know what life's going to hold, and it will take you to different places, and hearing your journey of like going into ed tech, leaving it. Sophie and I have a very similar story with that, right? And you know, I think when you enter ed tech, it's like, oh, it's so exciting. It's like, oh, and then, you know, grass is always greener kind of thing, right? Where like you get there, and no shade to people that are still in that industry, right? But like, there's pros and cons on both sides.
Yeah,
And you know,
sure.
I love that you took both of the public and private sector experiences and just made it your own. I think that's phenomenal and very brave, I might add.
It was interesting when it started to not feel great. We were on a call where I was, of course, fussing to Nick about how it didn't feel great. And he said, you know, we should start a company to see if we can start a company so that we never feel this way, our employees never feel this way, and our customers never feel this way. So the interesting part of that is we knew we were going to start a company with our core values even before we knew the problem we were going to solve, which I think is kind of backwards from the way a lot of people think about how they're going to go about doing things. But it was really critically important to us that we do it in a way that felt really authentic to who we were, because we were living amidst what didn't feel great to us.
I think I'll just add to that, just kind of playing off what you said, Steve. You know, when we had first started growing Performance Matters, it really felt like we were making an impact, you know, for teachers, for administration, even for students. And as it kind of grew and developed, I think the thing that both of us really struggled with is that it started to feel more corporate. And we were kind of losing that feeling of the impact that we were making. And we desperately wanted to get back to that. So like Marnie said, I think proving that we can do it in just in the normal business sense, but now we're back on track, and really our focus has become not only helping, you know, any individual, but really we have a focus on trying to help the young people of this world. And we feel like we've got a message that's really starting to resonate, especially in today's times, because it's really hard out there today. As my 21-year-old son will tell you, it's hard to find a job these days.
Yeah, 100%. I do want to dive into like other parts of this conversation, but I'd love to just mention that, like, I'm familiar with Performance Matters, and coming from a district that I taught in that was all power school, right? Like, we were Schoology, power school, Performance Matters. They went all in, right? And I remember the first time, like, when they first implemented Performance Matters, I was super excited for, like, what it can do in terms of visibility and collaboration, right?
Baseball
And,
card.
and yeah, exactly. And so I see these solutions, but then I think what we're really hitting on here is these companies, in order to make a larger impact, they have to grow. But in order for them to grow, oftentimes they have to make certain moves that changes the culture, and can I say sometimes, like, shift what the original mission and vision was to begin with.
Yeah, you definitely
100%
can.
you can say that.
And it's like it's almost like a this or that, right? You either going to start small, live with that culture, but not have the impact that you want, or you're gonna have the impact that you want, but then, like, lose track of who you were, right? And to me, that's like, it's such a huge problem, because what are we trying to solve? We're trying to solve the problems that our children are facing, right? With whatever those might be, right? And whatever those are. I don't know. I just wanted to point that out before we move on, because I think it's such a underlining tension that we have right now in the market and in classrooms and with leaders, that it's like, I'd be really curious to see where we are with this conversation in like 15, 20 years.
Yeah. I'm afraid to say and to think that it's the same thing, because the cycle just keeps repeating itself, right? These new innovative solutions that really, they're born out of really the mission of helping education, and the culture is great. But then at some point, like you said, Steve, it's got to scale, and these big companies come in and it becomes private equity's mission and culture. And you lose that touch, that impact in the spirit of trying to make a profit and running a business as a normal business would run. There's just it's a constant struggle. And I think you described it as well as anybody I've heard describe what our experience actually was, and what kind of has driven us to do the things that we're doing today.
And as a random aside, the first time I left, I went to Schoology and got acquired again. So, Steve, I'm well aware of every bit of what you were living in.
Yeah. So, okay, I want to dive in to the business of you, and I loved reading it. So just so y'all know, when I was reading it, I kind of got a sense of like, okay, this is me, Steve, reading this book, but I was trying to think of like who the target audience is, right? So I was like, oh, what would this be like if I was reading this like as a 16-year-old, right?
Yeah.
But then I got thinking, I'm like, what if I was in my 30s reading this, which I'm not in my 30s anymore.
Not anymore, old man.
Not anymore, barely. I'm trying to process that. So like, what if I'm someone in my 30s and I am like trying to enter a second or third career, right? And I got thinking, I'm like, this book is for everyone. And correct me if I'm wrong, like, that's the case, right? Like, was that the intent in terms of audience?
So definitely. We, as you know, are building an app where we think students, high school and college, is a good place to focus. But what's been very interesting is we have been getting parents buying the book for their children. And when they read it, they say, I actually needed that. My one friend was interviewing in the ed tech space, and she read the book and said, oh my gosh, this helped me interview better. And then she said, I bought the Audible. So when we were on vacation, I could say, like, hey, kids, you should listen to this because they're a junior and senior in high school. She said, but honestly, my husband's looking for work and I needed him to hear it. So I think you're right. It is definitely for everyone. But we wanted to have a focus because, if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority,
Right. Right.
Yeah, that myth of average, because if you shoot for the average, then you're literally shooting for nobody.
Yeah.
The before we dive into the book a little bit more, because I do have some questions. For those who haven't read it or have no clue what the book is, why don't we tell us a little bit about the book?
Yeah. So the book itself is a fable. It's a story, and it's a story about the lead character. Her name is Sydney, who's in college, and she's doing all the right things. Right? She's getting good grades. She has, she belongs to the right clubs, but she's struggling to stand out and make an impact. And it's a fable. So she runs across this magical mentor named Larry, who is really the wise, been there, done that type of guy, and he introduces her to a company called Blue, which basically says, "Hey, you should be the CEO of your own life." And we hear that all the time on social media, but it's not just being the CEO of your own life. You also need to be the head of marketing. You need to be the head of sales. You need to be your chief financial officer. You, like any business, you need to surround yourself with the right support network, a personal board of advisors. So what we're trying to do with the book is basically, it's funny, we often hear the phrase portrait of graduate, and portrait of graduate really talks about the fact that, it's durable and soft skills. That's what it highlights. They need to have problem solving, effective communication, collaboration. And those are really the types of skills that are hard to measure, but nobody really gives you a framework. And the framework with the business of you is a framework to acquire and develop those types of skills that are the leading indicator of whether you're going to be successful once you exit the education system. So that's what we're trying to do with the business of you through stories of lead character called Sydney. Marnie, fill in the gaps. What did I miss?
Oh no, I think that was gapless. I think that was very good. We tried to make it very readable. People are shocked that, like, I sat down and in 2 sittings, it took us 3 hours to read, but we did that so that you would have space to reflect. Like, Steve, as you were reading it, you were thinking about, how would I have felt as a 16-year-old? How would I have felt as a 30-year-old? And we've got some school systems piloting it where the students are reading it, and then they've got standalone lesson plans in their CTE program, or advisory periods, or flex periods, various different, ways to approach it, where they're doing some activities and then some reflections, so the students can really think about, okay, this isn't just a story about Sydney, but how am I on that same path, which is great to watch. I've been lucky enough to go in and watch this happen and teach them myself, and it's really fun to see.
Yeah.
So what I think is really fascinating with this is that you chose to write it as a fable rather than like a standard how-to manual. So why was this type of narrative story necessary for the goal that you had?
So I think some of it is what Nick mentioned about not having a framework. If we said emotional intelligence skills are important, who would disagree with that? Who doesn't think problem solving, listening, collaboration, empathy are important? 0.0 people think that's a bad idea. But if I asked you to list the standard 8 emotional intelligence skills, can you do that? You probably could list 30 things that all are important and great and meaningful. But how do you ensure that all of those things are being put into practice and that you're working on all of those things, because they're just really big? Resilience, adaptability. And when you tell teachers in a portrait of a graduate, for example, we're going to do all these things, everyone agrees that is a great idea, but no one sits a math teacher down and says, okay, so you are in charge of working on resilience and empathy and listening for your kids. And so we thought that if we tell a story so people can see how these skills actually play out in the real world and then connect it to their actual lives, that is when students start connecting the dots. Because it's not like school systems are not teaching these skills. It is just that the connection for students is sometimes missed. You have to be really explicit about the fact that Nick mentioned you're in charge of HR. Well, what does that mean? Well, what does HR in a company do? They're in charge of the people and the culture. So what are your core values? A lot of people on the first day of school ask kids what's important to them, right? But then do they connect that with how that's going to work out in the career path that they choose? So that's why we decided to write it as a story, because then you're able to see, oh, this is what it means to me as a person, not just as a student who's got to check boxes and get credentials. This is how I'm going to bring value to the world.
And relate to it. I think the one thing that is important to point out is the subtitle of our book is Ask the Right Questions, Tell Your Story, right? And Lead Your Life. And we talk often about the fact that storytelling is 22 times more effective than just reciting facts. Kids remember it. People remember it. So, you know, in essence, we're almost eating our own dog food. We talk about in the book how important it is to be able to tell your story. We talk about on our podcast and our social posts, you know, all the time. The biggest challenge that young adults face, even experienced adults face, is tell me about yourself. And especially young people really struggle to tell their own story in such a way that aligns with who they are as a person. So the fact that we use storytelling to get our point across is very much in alignment with one of the key messaging in the book, which is how important it is to tell stories and why it matters, because people remember stories, they relate to stories, and then ultimately they can practice you know, the concepts that we're presenting in the book.
So just listening to this, the thing that keeps on coming back to me is like they are taking the common buzzwords we see that are perceived, for better or for worse, normally as just buzzwords, and you're making them reality. Like
with
that
relevance.
with
Yeah,
relevance,
thank you.
right? Yeah. And that is like, oh my gosh, they cracked that. That's like, so yeah, I really love like the connection with like, you know, like Marnie, like you kind of talked about like, oh, these are the things that we normally hear, these are the things that we know that are important, but how do we make that happen, right? And I putting a book into a classroom, into the hands of children, like that's a good way to do that. And you're saying that now, like you're at a place where districts are adopting this and they're embedding lessons.
Yes. Yeah. As a matter of fact, if anybody's listening, we've worked with Caroline County Public Schools, which happens to be where I used to teach. They've created 4 little standalone lesson plans, and they are more than happy for me to share. So if anybody's interested, we can provide what we have. We also have reflection questions from each chapter. So as you probably remember from the book, after each department, Sydney, the character, writes a journal page where she talks about, okay, what does this department mean in the business world? What does it mean in my life? And then what questions do I need to ask myself to really improve in this area? So we've expanded on that a bit and written reflection questions for each of the chapters along the way. And just this week, I worked with 100 students, and it was interesting. I just had 30-minute workshops with them, but we did some activities around core values. So we played games like would you rather types of games, you know, like would you rather be creative or reliable? I made them stand up in a row so they were all facing me. So they had to make these decisions without looking at their friends, right? So like I have to pick creative or reliable without knowing if my friend is picking the same one. And you could watch at the beginning, they just wanted to turn around and see what everybody else was picking because this is awkward. But then I had them write in the journal page in the book, which throws off sophomores all together, right? Like, you want me to write in this book? Yeah, you're going to take it home. You're going to write in it. But then they had to introduce themselves to each other with the words that they picked from the games. And it's really interesting to see and to hear them talk about it. At first it's quiet, but then they had to question each other of like, well, why did you pick the word, enthusiastic, creative, whatever? And they really have to learn they really start owning who they are. So it's fun to watch for sure. I could go on for days. I'll be quiet and let Nick fill in some gaps.
I have nothing to fill in. I think you spoke, you've covered everything. Well, almost.
Well, it's like you can't get into the business of you if you don't know you.
Yeah.
Correct.
And so we
do love our stats. I'll throw one more out there. Like self-awareness is one of the key indicators of success in life.
And when we work with, I think the challenge that we're trying to solve, and we reflect it in the story, and we go into more detail with the app, is it's awkward to do self-reflection, especially if you're in high school or you're at college or university. It's really awkward. So the question then becomes, okay, well, how do we change it up and make it engaging and fun for the user? And Marnie talked about some of the live in-person activities. We do one activity. She talked about the would you rather, and you're kind of doing the self-reflection. But we do one activity, and we did this at the Vibe Shift conference, where we hand out a handkerchief, right, or a napkin, and basically say, okay, write down a core value and basically your tagline as an individual, and then you have to explain that to people in a networking type setting. Hi, my name is Nick. I am the quiet problem solver, or something to that effect. And it becomes a fun activity because you don't know what's going to come out of your mouth, but you start to have to go through the cycle and say, okay, what is it that really drives me? What's a one word that really describes who I am and what values to me, what I value? And we're trying to eclipse the hurdles of the awkwardness by making it fun. And we've done that through, like Caroline County has built in some of these activities into their syllabus and their curriculum with this. And we're trying to do the same through kind of the electronic digitized version of the business of you.
Yeah, I love that. I know that they're within the book, it mentions blue. Am I getting that? Yeah. And even
now that's a real thing, right?
It is becoming a real thing. Yeah.
That was my question. I was like, so tell us a little bit more about blue.
It's a real thing at Nick's house.
Oh, okay.
No, it's real. It's where we started. I think before we even decided to write the book, Marnie and I were in an airport. We had just done a keynote on our other book, Lead It Like Lasso. And we knew the whole time that where we wanted to go was back to education and impacting students and giving them some tools to help them stand out and differentiate themselves. And we were busy kind of talking about requirements. And Marnie, why don't you tell the story?
Yeah. It's like, I want to step in.
Yeah.
So I had the notebook, and when you build software, as you both know, you have to do product requirements. So the student will log in and see X, Y, or Z, right? The student will do this. The student will do that. And as I was writing down, I literally had the student will at the top of my paper. And I said, boy, this is going to feel like writing a business fable. This is like The Go-Giver by Bob Berg. And at that point, Nick said, hold on, before we get started, I'm going to run to the restroom, which was right behind our gate. So, 60 seconds, he's back, and he said, I had a terrible idea. And I said, while you were in the restroom? And he said, well, actually, you had a terrible idea. And I said, maybe, but why are you in the restroom? And how do you know? And he said, I think we should write that business fable. I think that for people to see how Blue is going to operate as an app and why it's critically important, we should write the book. Because if you write a book, you really have to have clarity on your message. You can't write a book that you can read in 3 hours if you're going to ramble all over the place and not get to your point. And by telling this story, it forced us to really decide what was critically important. What are we going to include in the app? What are we not going to include in the app? Because what's critically important for somebody to actually do this work for their lives. So early next year, we will have the app for folks to use. And I say it's live at Nick's house because he's the one that gets in the code and
I think,
et cetera.
I think the important context here, and I didn't mention this when I talked about the book, Sophie, when you asked me earlier, in addition to the Magic Mentor, Larry, he points her to using this app called Blue, which is, as we like to describe it, if you're familiar with Duolingo, it's like it's Duolingo except for personal development. So it's a gamified,
career coach in your pocket,
points, levels, badges. It's a gamified way to do the work, the self-reflection, interview simulators, building a virtual board of advisors for you. So it's just a way. It's a digital way, because we know that a lot of kids, they're very, it's second nature to them to just pull out their phone and start doing the work. For a lot of kids to have a fun way to embrace the awkward and really start knocking out the different departments of the business of Nick Inc., of Steve Inc., of Sophie Inc., of Marnie Inc., whoever it might be.
So part of what you're touching on, I was doing in the CTE classroom, but having to probably work harder to facilitate than having an app like yours, right? Like I had to, for example, mock interviews, right?
Yeah.
And having, coaching them up on that and being able to, make students kind of feel like they can, and kind of use that awkwardness. I'm like, no. It is going to be awkward, but y'all want to make money.
Yeah. This is how it happens. Yeah.
This you don't get to just be a YouTuber for life. That's not, the likelihood of that is you could, but generally speaking, I would think that you would have to do an interview at one point in your life, right?
Well, I mean, being a YouTuber, you have to know how to tell your story, right? If that's your plan, you've got to be first in line to do this work, because that's how you're going to get there. And to get your 10,000 hours in, you better start now, right?
Yeah. And AI was helping me there towards the end, right, with that. In the sense of here's your custom mock interview experience that had preloaded questions, and before they do it with an actual person, right? And so, but what you're hitting on is almost consolidating a lot of that career readiness piece with respect to CTE standards, but just to do generally, which I think is phenomenal.
Well, and
that is absolutely it.
In West Virginia, we recently just added in you have to have a class in middle school to do some sort of career exploration, and I feel like this would just be do this book that is that is exactly what it would do. And I love that it's a fable, that it's telling a story, because there are so many reasons why people need a variety of stories because then it builds empathy and understanding, and it grows their background knowledge and their experiences through a book, because you can go anywhere in the universe through a book. And if you don't have that experience, then you can get it by reading. And while you were talking through, she goes through each business department and learns what that business department does. You're not just learning about yourself through that, but you're also learning what job options there are out there.
Yeah.
And that was definitely a gap that, so Nick's son is 21 now. My kids are 24 and 26. And so when we started down this journey, these were conversations we were having all of the time at our own kitchen tables. It's interesting. I went through the process of the questioning and the business of you with my son, my daughter's boyfriend 2 summers ago, the same week. Within 3 weeks, they all had new jobs in new fields that feel much more aligned to who they are, which is pretty fascinating. And Nick was talking about how his son was in the business program at school, but really didn't know. And I didn't know when I left education, maybe you two did, but when I left and landed in a company, I was like, I don't know what a CMO or a CFO or a CTO is. I don't know what a department is. I don't know what a a director is versus a manager. I don't care what title you give me. I don't know what any of this, like, this is all meaningless to me. And we thought we didn't want to call the book Adulting 101 or Business 101 because then kids might not read it. But if it's about the business of you, then maybe they would.
Well, and like seriously, I can't speak for Steve, but going from, because I was a math teacher and then I was a district instructional coach, and I fell in love with the product and went and worked for him. And I learned so much about the business world and the different departments, and I found marketing to be absolutely fascinating. And like, I enjoyed being a teacher, but that wasn't the right environment for me. And then I loved being a coach, but and then I loved training people on this tool for everything to be more accessible. But then it just felt like I was outgrowing I was learning and outgrowing. And now I'm sort of in the middle trying to figure out where I fit now, because I'm not working there anymore. And I'm like, I have this passion, I have this want, but if I had known this, then I probably would have never been a teacher. I would have gone down a completely different path.
Yeah.
And that's not, I mean, that's more common to us. And we've had the opportunity to speak with hundreds, if not thousands of young people through all of our work here. And so often we hear that, we ask the question, well, why did you get into this field or whatever? Because my older brother did it, because my parents told me it was a good idea, because I took a career interest survey when I was in 7th grade, and it said I said I like to stay in hotels, so it put me in hospitality or something to that effect. And you know what? We talked to so many people who are just like, okay, this isn't where, just like you, Sophie, this isn't where I feel like I should be. And then they're just starting over from scratch. And I think that's such a missed opportunity for young people these days. As a parent, that's what I see, right? There's not enough time really working with students, whether it's parents at home or educators, right? The career coaches, because the numbers are, as a career coach, I'm responsible for 350 kids. It's just not, it's not a successful outcome. But the work that children can put in to really define and think about and do the self-reflection of what motivates them, then we can marry the technology to say, okay, if you really like to help people, these are the options. AI is great at that, right? If you like to help people, these are some career tracks, not, okay, I just filled out this one assessment and boom, all right, you should go into hospitality, or you should go into automotive tech or something to that effect. We just think a lot more work could be done in that regard. And it would save a lot of people time when they get into their late 20s and realize that this isn't the path that I really was meant to go down.
And I want to add, there are parents out there that are already recognizing this gap and paying thousands of dollars for a career coach for their kids. Because they realize, they're going to get into a battle with their child if they sit around saying, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? Because they don't have the tools and the language and the questions to ask. And we do not feel like that is equitable. Like, this is the new inequity in education. It is the connection piece that students aren't getting. And like Nick said, career coaches, I worked with 2 this week, that their numbers, 1,200 students to one of them. So, and they're supposed to give individualized career counseling. How? How are they going to take all the hours the kids are in school and divide that out? So, all right, here are your 7 minutes this year. That should get everybody successful in what they want to be.
So yes. And so like Sophie earlier described like her experience with leaving education, the thing that keeps on resonating with me in this conversation is like, so me leaving the classroom, right? So I was not an administrator at that time. I left the classroom, worked in ed tech, and kind of what you all were talking about earlier was like you get to a company and there are a lot of acronyms and things that
So
you
many.
don't know. So many. And it's like, but then education has those, right?
Oh, yes.
And so, but now I went back into education, and now I have to, part of what I do at my college is support community engagement and marketing. So when I was in ed tech, it was a lot of explaining education to a bunch of people that only knew business. But now I'm having to explain to a bunch of educators all of the things that are required to know the business, right? And because like it was kind of like this come to Jesus moment when I got there. I'm like, okay, you all need to treat this like a business. You can't just treat it like a K through 12 school. Like that's if you want to grow it, right? And so that to me is a big indicator of the gap that you're talking about, right? There needs to be a bridge between education and industry in a way like the education space needs to know what we need in industry, right? And vice versa. But then I love how you pointed out, like, it's not just that bridge, there's a third bridge with families. And somehow we need to figure out how to bring all three to the same table to have the conversation together, because those are big gaps that we are seeing.
Oh, 100%. And I wanted to come back to, you tied into what Sophie was saying about having left the classroom. And Sophie, you mentioned that like maybe I wouldn't have been a teacher. One of the things that we have found is, and we talked about this a lot when we wrote Lead It Like Lasso, for successful folks, one of those, how they do anything is how they do everything. So even though you're not in a classroom teaching, there is something about what drew you to teaching, that you are a teacher at heart, that will play out as a trainer, as a, when Nick and I left and built a software company for IT business owners, I would often, I'd be talking to 250 business owners and would say, I started out as a high school math teacher. So some of you are wondering why you should listen to me. And I'm going to tell you, I sold pre-calculus to 16-year-olds. So if you're looking to figure out how to sell something, I'm your girl, right? And they're like, oh, all right. Yeah, if she can sell pre-calculus, that's a hard move. But I think that's important to think about. Like Nick said, if you figure out that you want to help people or serve people, that's not just hospitality. You might be able to do the hospitality track in CTE, but learn how that will support you in being a teacher or in a ministry or a service member, right? There are a lot of ways to serve people that people need to recognize that. And Nick and I often talk about the fact that we're in the midst of a character revolution. We didn't come up with that title. Adam Grant did in his book, Hidden Potential. And that's in a digital automated AI world where skills are becoming more commoditized. What will make you stand out are your human skills, your character skills, your durable skills, etc. And that's really what's critically important to figure out as you're doing that work for yourself. That's why the self-reflection is so important.
And those skills are really the ones, those durable skills, those soft skills, those, as I can tell you this as a fact, leading 4 different businesses, those are the ones that are more important today than they've ever been, and harder to find than it's ever been. It's really a struggle for organizations to find people who are going to show up, who can collaborate, who show resilience. That is what the business world is looking for, because guess what? A lot of the technical skills that we're taught in education, the technical skills, AI can do that better these days. Now, that doesn't mean that those technical skills aren't of value, right? Understanding math is of critical value because it teaches you problem solving, right? Understanding, science is, you learn all about inquiry and being curious. So those are really important, but it's what we typically think of that added value 20, 30 years ago when I was in school, learning how to code or run some sort of regression analysis. AI can do that all for you right now. It's how do you interpret it? What are the skills that are the foundation that really move industry forward, the problem solving skills, all those types of things. I think that's important for educators to realize that from a business standpoint, that's what we're looking for students to demonstrate as they enter adulthood.
When
You
am
really
I ever
got
going to
me.
use this is different now.
Yes, when am I ever going to use this? As a former math teacher, that question comes up all the time. And the answers are easier to find now because AI can just tell me exactly what professions this could actually apply directly in. But my go-to answer was always, you're not just learning the math, you're learning
Correct.
problem solving, critical thinking, skepticism, because I also taught science. You're learning how to human here. Like, you're not just learning the Pythagorean theorem, which is my absolute most favorite thing to teach.
You are my people.
Yeah. Steve's like, what?
I taught history. I have no idea what you're talking about.
And then, like, with now the world that we live in, they used to even say this when I was going through school, like, we don't know the jobs that are going to be out there when someone graduates from college that they're going to have. So we're actually teaching and preparing students for jobs that aren't even created yet. But now with AI, that's exponentially more true, because a bunch of jobs that were done like human power can be done with AI, and that's just going to get easier and easier. But that means other things are going to need to come in. So we are preparing students for jobs that we can't even imagine yet because we're not there yet. And so the future being so unknown and so mystical is really exciting, but then knowing who you are and where you want to fit and what you want to do is even more important, because it's so unknown. Everything else is so unknown. You can actually find resiliency in knowing yourself and knowing what you can do and what you're capable of doing in the unknown.
It's like calling out it's calling out that we've been focusing on the wrong thing, right? We've been focused on, like, oh, what kind of job do you want? What do you want to be when you grow up? Like this, like what you all are suggesting is like, no, focus on who they are. Don't focus on where they're going. They'll figure out where they're going if they know who they are.
That is why we often say, college and career prep is broken, because it is all about the job instead of the student themselves. And we are trying to turn that, because, again, as Sophie just said, we're literally giving them job assessments to try to name a job that they want that might not exist in 5 years. That seems absurd, to send them down a path for a specific job that might not exist. But if they figure out who they are and develop those skills that are their superpowers, because that's really what if you figure out your core values and realize how they are your superpowers, it unlocks careers for you. It unlocks the way to speak about yourself in a college essay, in a job interview. It really changes the way you can build who you want to become, not what you want to do in the future.
I love this conversation. Yeah.
This is and it's really having me reflect a lot, because I remember being like, oh, I want to be a teacher because, and I'm going to be one of those really rare ones that you probably have never heard this before. Well, the reason why is probably what you never heard before. I want to be the teacher because I wanted to have my summers off, because I wanted to go to 4-H camp. I wanted to run 4-H camps. I wanted to build those places and be part of that community that allowed me to be me and feel seen and to meet people and to explore different hobbies and have different experiences. I wanted to run 4-H camps. I don't even go to 4-H camp anymore.
I'm thinking that you might be finding what it is you want to do in the midst of this conversation.
I've been, like, since leaving, actually the last year, being in ed tech, I was actually doing a lot of reflecting, because as you and the conversation that you and Nick had, Steve and I had the same one. Like, this doesn't feel great. This doesn't seem to be filling my bucket, is what Steve says a lot. It's like, this isn't filling my bucket. And so there's been a whole lot, and AI has been helping me a lot, actually, with processing what that means. And for it to now, because I've been on this job journey now for a little over a month, and telling it like, well, putting in job descriptions, being like, but I don't want to do that. And that doesn't seem good to me. And I don't want to, like, that's not where my strengths are, and blah, blah, blah. And like, I'm learning a lot about me, but I'm also like, AI thinks I'm amazing. Like, like my Gemini is like, you are this majestic unicorn. And I'm like, no. And he's like, no, that's imposter syndrome talking. You are amazing. And I was like, dude, where have you been my whole life?
Where are you hiring?
Like, where's this bit? Like I've had people lift me up. I've had people see the real me, but like like AI is producing back to me what I've been telling it, and I didn't realize what I was saying about myself and what that actually meant. And so it's been really eye-opening to see what AI thinks as my potential, based on like cover letters and resumes that I've written about myself about, and like aligning to different job descriptions. But then there's still that, I don't even know what that job does type of thing. So it's really interesting. If you know you and know what you're capable of, there are really a lot of different jobs that you can pursue because of what the skills needed to do that. But then also, and I came across this while exploring, it was a little revelation, whatever the word is, that I was not applying for certain jobs. At first I was just, everybody gets an application. Instructional designer, I can do that. Everybody gets an application. But then I started looking at the companies. I don't want to work for insurance companies.
Yeah.
Like, that's not
ideal.
Fill my bucket. That's not my mission. That's not my passion. And finding what's important to you is exactly what you guys are trying to do with Blue and the Business of You, to help people figure out what's important for you. What are your characteristics? What's good for you, so that you can find the right fit, mission, and vision.
And then communicating it, right? And I think if you can put, a story and words to your superpowers and what's important to you, you tend to attract other people who either admire those superpowers or have those same superpowers. And then that's when your network really starts to explode. And then you start to come across, just like we were talking earlier, opportunities that don't exist, right? It goes back to being able to communicate, not be afraid to communicate it. And the reality of it is, if you put the work in and you do that self-reflection, I, as an introvert, I don't like to communicate things, but if it's truly authentic me, it's so much easier to do that. And then all of a sudden you start meeting connectors who introduce you to different opportunities. It's really powerful. And to just be you. To just be you, it unlocks so many opportunities, but you have to put in the work to really identify what that is before you get there.
Love that. All right, so we're coming down to the tail end of the episode here. So
I have so many more questions, but Steve's right.
We are, but just so you know, you both are welcome back, right? Like,
we'd love to come back.
So just to continue, maybe do like a debrief and kind of figure out, what that would look like. But we always ask, and maybe we start, Marnie, we can start with you first. We always ask our guests, like, what is top of mind for you in education right now? What is something that you feel that we should really be focused on? What is under the hat?
So I really think I kind of already said it with career prep is broken with how we're focusing on the JOB job and not the kid. I think that aligns with what Nick was talking about with the portrait of a graduate. We have all of the words that we know are critically important for students and future workers, but we're not doing a good job of connecting the content with the student and connecting with their lives. And if we can fix that, I think we'll reduce a lot of anxiety, because people will understand who they are and who they want to become, and create a path that will get there, even in a world that we're not sure exactly what it's going to look like in terms of technical skills. So that's what's top of mind for us. And Nick and I talk about that under the hat, above the hat, next to the hat, beyond the hat, like every day, because that's the biggest problem we think we need fixing.
Yeah. Yeah. Nick, do you have other thoughts?
I mean, very similar thoughts. I think I'll come at this, since I'm really the non-educator on this call, right? I'm the person that consumed what education produces in the business world, and I want to make the statement that credentials matter less today than they've ever mattered before, and I think that's important for students to realize, families to realize. As we consume students, once they leave the education system, it is all about their ability to interact with other humans. That is what is going to allow them to stand out, differentiate themselves. So it's the same message Marnie was just talking about, just in a different way. And I would also just kind of love to plug something. We just wrote an article on the Portrait of Graduate, and a lot of stuff that talks about this very notion. And that's available, on thebusinessofyou.ai, right, Marnie, and our LinkedIn accounts.
LinkedIn sure.
It's going to be after this, because I just got out of that.
I'm like, it'll be there Monday.
But yeah, I mean, we're not saying that we have all the answers. This is just two perspectives. Marnie's really one, our single perspective, but we want to move the conversation forward, and we want to try to help as many people as possible. So we'd love for people to check us out and engage with us.
Yeah. I love that. Speaking of which, like offline, I have a lot of other questions for both of you, and so I'm very keen to like continue this conversation online, offline, because I really appreciate, love the passion and the work that you both are doing, and so for those that are watching right now, we do have the banner up, thebusinessofyou.ai. I'm on the site right now. A lot of good stuff. Pick up a copy of the book, and thank you both for deciding to spend this Saturday with us. We've loved it, and we've learned a lot.
Well, thanks for having us. I've very much enjoyed the chat.
Yeah, this has been great. Thank you both.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. For all that are watching, listening, all that fun stuff, continue to show that support for the show. Sophie and I really appreciate it. We are a little on the slow side. We're into like almost into December, where like
the winter holidays,
where it's hard for guests, it's hard for us, but we will be jamming stuff out more full throttle when we get into the spring, into January, so just be ready for that. But yeah, enjoy the rest of your day, friends, and as always, keep your hats on but your minds open. Till next time, bye-bye.